The public has a long-held fascination with detectives. Detectives see a side of life the average person is never exposed to. In this podcast series, I Catch Killers with Gary Jubilant, I'll be interviewing a whole range of people you come across as a detective, including police, bad guys and victims. I spent 34 years as a cop. For 25 of those years I was catching killers. That's what I did for a living. I was a homicide detective. I'm no longer just interviewing bad guys. Instead, I'm taking the public into the world in which I operated. The guests I selected have amazing stories from all sides of the law. The interviews are raw and honest, just like the world they inhabited. No one who steps into the world of crime comes out unchanged. Join me now while I take you into this world. This episode of I Catch Killers contains conversations that some listeners may find confronting or triggering. Discretion is advised. Welcome to another episode of I Catch Killers. Just to recap before we start part 2 of I Catch Killers, with my guests, the family members of 3 murdered Aboriginal children, Colleen, Evelyn and Clinton. These 3 children all lived in the same street on the outskirts of a small country town on the mid-north coast of New South Wales. They were murdered over a 6-month period in 1990 and 1991. No one has been convicted of the serial killing of these 3 children, but the families are not giving up. The first part of the podcast, we're talking about the events surrounding the children's disappearance and how racism played a part in the way that the investigation was conducted. And I want to focus on now from the time that the trial for the murder of Evelyn, where the person that was charged was acquitted, and that was in 2006. That was at Port Macquarie. You guys remember that day?
All too well.
Lulu, how did it feel like it was your niece?
Well, besides dealing with the bad verdict, the verdict, we had a bunch of riot coppers sitting in another room or another courtroom, and before we going in to get the verdict, we'll all sit down there wondering, what are they all doing here?
Yeah, I think we need to, you've brought up an interesting point. We need to explain that. So let's take it back. The trial was up at Port Macquarie. They convened a Supreme Court up there, and the jury was impanelled, and the trial ran for about 4 weeks, I think it was. Halfway during the trial, you guys have come at me and Jason, and you're a bit pissed off with us and going, what are the right police doing here? Because we didn't know the right police were coming. We told our senior police that we didn't need the right police here. We knew everyone in the court. It was you mob, and so there was no problems. And you got cranky at us, saying, "Why have you brought the right squad in?" So how did you feel like that? That was a.
I just felt like I was again stunned as to why that was happening. Through this whole process, as we've always said, we have we have carried ourselves in the utmost dignity for people. That families that have been treated the way we have. We have not rioted once, we have not smashed up a town or anything, or burnt anything down, or bashed any white people or anything like that. We've carried ourselves with the utmost dignity and pride and held our heads up through all this. And this is how we get treated, by thinking that we're going to do this, we're going to smash up and riot in a courtroom.
Yeah. And I know, because I had briefed the senior police, and I said I don't consider there's a risk here. That's the families. I've known the families for years, and everyone's behaved themselves. That was overruled, and they brought the right squad.
Me and my sisters walked in, me, Penny, Leslie and Rebecca. We sat with Rebecca, and we all sat in the back, and we held each other's hands, and we were just praying, please, 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 please. We knew deep down that we wasn't going to get the verdict we wanted, but we still prayed that we would. Then we got that verdict, and it felt like someone kicked you in the guts. Someone stabbed us again. And we just sat there for about a couple of seconds. Then we said, come on, we're getting up. And I said, we're just getting out. We're running into the room, because we knew everyone would be around us. And we just sat in the room for a little while. And we just had our attention on Rebecca. And, just she was upset, she was shaken, she was crying and that, but she knew that's what the verdict was going to be anyway. With the foregone conclusion that that's what was going to happen.
And did you feel like the trial was slipping away because the evidence just wasn't being presented?
It wasn't being presented right. I'm no lawyer, but geez, it wasn't, because the witnesses couldn't understand, some of the witnesses, the Aboriginal people couldn't understand what the lawyers were asking. And I felt like getting up and saying, he means this, you know? Because we have a totally different English and body language, and we'll use body language, facial expressions to express what we mean, and what something means to us means something totally different to the white community.
Yeah, well, we had Dr. Diana Reeds, and the background to her being at the trial was during the inquest. Jason and I was sitting there watching you guys giving evidence, and it was a foreign environment. It's scary, a courtroom at the best of times. And we could see that there was miscommunication, that things were being not put across the way that we know it. And so on the back of that, we tracked down a linguistics expert, Dr. Diana Reeds, who had done some work in the Bowraville community before. And she, of her own volition, came up to the mission, came up to the community and did a report. At the start of the trial, I suggested to the prosecutor that perhaps we could use this report, an expert's report, to help the jury understand what's going on with the witnesses there. It was raised before the judge. There was a bit of reluctance. I felt from the prosecutor to raise it, but it was raised, and then the judge, I think, and this is just going off memory, said that if there's an incident where one of the witnesses is not explaining themselves properly, perhaps it could be called upon, Diana Reeds could be called upon then, her expert statement on Aboriginal English and the different ways of communicating. But it never was. Mm. And I was frustrated seeing...
You were sitting there and you could see them, and I'm thinking, they don't understand, and I'm just rubbing my head and I'm hitting my sister and we're punching it, you know, because we could see that they didn't understand what they were talking about, you know. And as I said, you know, and then also, you know, usually when a black fella's in a court, it's usually because they're the perpetrators. Mm. So don't want to give themselves up.
Well, look, without saying, but I do understand. I know exactly what you're saying. That it's quite intimidating.
Well, yeah. They're very rarely the time.
I do know what you're saying now, because I've been there in the court. I've been sitting on the wrong side. Yeah.
But, you know, very rarely you get a black fella in there who's a victim, and a witness to...
Quite often, because the high representation rate of Aboriginal people in the justice system.
Yeah. But, you know, and so they're not going to be too trustworthy. And, you know, the history... not only of Bowraville and other places like that, the history of Australia, but also the history of how we've been treated from 1990 to 2006. We lost all faith then.
Well, you've got to rebuild or build that trust.
Yeah, and...
Lucas, what impacted the Evelyn's matter? Because it still wasn't... No one's been charged with Colleen's murder. But when Evelyn's trial was lost, when the person was acquitted, how did it impact on your family?
It impacts on our family a lot because we are related. We're a very close related family. So it impacts the whole three families, I think, because, you know, we're all fighting. We'll always come together for the three kids and fight together. And if it was Clinton's family or Evelyn's family and that happened, you know, we would feel that hurt with them because we all know what we're feeling. We all know what we're going through.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was devastating to us also for that, because it just felt like, you know, if they're not going to get any justice, then what hope have we got?
Well, I think that the families at the trial, you all bandied together and thought, well, if we get a victory here, it's a victory for all the families.
Yeah,
and
that's
so
correct.
everyone, the whole community felt the pain. It was one of the most inspirational things I've seen, how you guys reacted in court when the verdict came back, because I thought it was so dignified. There was no yelling, screaming. Everyone stood up, turned their back on the jury basically, and the judge, and walked out. And I thought it was a good fingers up to the justice system, but in a dignified way. And you guys walked out. Now, from there was a meeting at the community hall. You guys invited Jason and myself along. And it was horrible, wasn't it? There was a lot of emotion, a lot of tears, and I think everyone was just shocked and upset and that. But that's when the thought of the double jeopardy legislation came about.
It was very simple to me. Just change it. It's the right thing to do. Just, how hard is it to right the wrongs? The families have had to pay for the mistake of the way it was investigated. Why can't they? And this is a way to fix it. Just bloody fix it. They can change laws overnight if they want to. They just don't want to.
And to explain the significance of the double jeopardy legislation, when someone has been acquitted, prior to you guys getting it overturned, when someone's been acquitted of a crime, they could never be retried again.
Yep.
So the person that was acquitted of murdering Clinton and acquitted of murdering Evelyn, who was the same person, could in fact walk out of the court and go, well, I did it, but you can't, there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
But then on the back of your campaign, and it started off, I think you did a story on Australian Story and got some push along. So again, that's getting the media involved, because no one was listening to you guys until you had someone pushing for you. How did you feel when the double jeopardy legislation was overturned? Because that was quite amazing, that on the back of your campaign that managed to get it overturned.
I suppose there was a light at the end of the tunnel.
We thought there was a victory, there was a chance. Through this whole process has been highs and lows, and we was on another high. And, we thought, oh, good, we're going to get into court.
Well, it was and I shared your enthusiasm for it. I thought it opened it up with a real chance of giving it a go. So on the back of that, a brief of evidence was put forward to the DPP and was sent to the DPP on looking at it. The DPP didn't even bother speaking to any of the police involved in the investigation, and then I think that's when we started getting the Friday afternoon notifications. Do you want to talk us through those, Leonie? Because
there's more than one.
Yeah.
One distinct one I remember, it was in 2013. I can't think which one that was.
What was the one?
There was one where I was sitting at my sister Penny's place, and Viv Tedeschi, who just happened to be the ex-wife of Mark Tedeschi,
the prosecutor.
Yep. And she rings me up. She's my doctor. She rings me up 5:30. And she's my doctor, and she rings me up and she said, oh, I hope you don't mind. The Daily Telegraph have rung me and they've asked me for my opinion on with the double jeopardy, the outcome of that,
They rejected the application.
Yeah, the application's been rejected, and what my thoughts were. And I said, well, what did you just say? And she said, oh, don't you know yet? I said, nope, I don't know. And she said, oh, well, they've just called me and this is what I've said. I said, oh, thanks. And by this time it's 6 o'clock, Friday afternoon. So there's no one you can call, and the only people you can call is family. So I may have rung Leonie, and I said, Leonie, this has happened. And that's how we found out.
To put it in perspective, I think there was, and I've lost track of them, there's been so many, but we made an application to the DPP, that was rejected, then made an application to the Attorney General, which was rejected, and another application to the Attorney General that was rejected. I do remember on one occasion, I was over in Perth Friday afternoon, and you phoned me, Leonie, and said you've just been told that they've rejected the application. I think this might have been the one with the DPP. And you said, and you were told to ring me,
Yes,
and I'll explain.
And you had no idea.
No one had even bothered speaking to me, and that was a Friday afternoon. Everyone had walked out of the office. From a police point of view, it was fairly obvious what was going on, and now that I'm working in the media, I could see it as clear as day. That the bad news was being buried on a Friday afternoon, so you guys couldn't get on the front foot. Then the next time, where you mentioned Viv Tedeschi, that the journalists got briefed before the families were informed, and I think that's what you found so offensive.
Yeah, and that must have been the 2013, because I got a call from someone, I can't think who it was, and then he said, and you will see a article in the newspaper on it, so they know before the families know. Like, is there no common courtesy?
And it's not like they didn't have our phone numbers.
Yeah.
They
know
all
who we are.
media, all politicians, everyone all the attorney generals, Aboriginal affairs, all the ministers, everyone's got our phone numbers and our emails.
Yeah.
You know, and if they couldn't get one, they could have got one of them.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, the frustrating part about that, it felt like the disrespect that was shown during the original investigation, where the resources weren't put in, was now carrying through to the cynical way.
Continuing, and it happened more than once.
Yeah.
It just rolled on. They didn't learn anything from the initial investigation.
Yeah.
You know.
I think they just didn't care.
I believe they thought we'd go away. These politicians and judges and DPPs and police commissioners are all open, we're going away, but we keep coming back like a bad smell.
Clearly they don't know you.
And, you know, we just keep coming back. And so that's why they did. And they must think haven't they heard the saying, treat them mean, keep them keen?
Yeah.
So the worse they treat us, we keep coming back fighting more.
Well, there was, and this is where I think it's such an amazing story and the journey that you guys have been on, because marching on Parliament, I can't remember how many times we marched on Parliament, but I think there was at least 3 occasions, possibly 4 occasions, blocking off Macquarie Street. And I remember, Leonie, you were organising the protest march at one stage and said you didn't have the money to make the application, and there was a few other hurdles. So you were still trying to be respectful of it. Yeah. And in fairness, I think the police, the way they responded to the protest was quite good.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the first big one we did, I actually ended up filling in the paperwork, and I thought I emailed it to them.
Yeah.
I didn't. And then afterwards I went up to the cops and I said, thanks for standing back, because it could have ended so differently if they had come in and, you know, and they said, well, if you put the paperwork in, you know, and I'm like, what? I did.
Yeah.
But I sent emails and it wasn't there. but the last one we did, we made a decision not to.
Yeah.
Because
you're protesting.
Yeah, we decided everyone can go on. They're not telling us, they're not going to confine us to the footpath. Everyone protests on the footpath. We want to block the road off. And I tried to avoid the cop. And I was just like this. And David Shoebridge is standing there. I said, is that the police behind me? Yeah. But they come up and I said, I'll be honest with you, we haven't done the paperwork and we're taking the road. And he said, just a minute, and he come back, he said, we'll give you we'll block half the road off for you.
Yeah.
So, like, you know.
And that's, and as you said, it could have gone completely south if there was resistance there, and it could have got ugly. But it was during those protests that David Shoebridge, and I think protested once and nothing happened. And so I think in conversations, not that I was speaking to you guys, but you said you're going to protest again. And I said, okay, we'll do it. And then you protest again. But then you got David Shoebridge involved. And on the back of that, you got a parliamentary inquiry. And that was a significant thing. How did you guys feel, like Lucas, from your point of view?
It felt like any time we get that chance to go forward in like this situation, you kind of go in with mixed emotions. You know, you want to be positive, you want to be happy that we're finally going to go somewhere. But then there's always in the back of your mind thinking, oh, you know, is this going to be it? Is this going to be our last chance? Are they going to reject us? and you really just had to just go in and just go with it, because you couldn't go in feeling positive because you're being let down so many times, and what people don't understand is that we still have to live our everyday lives at home and go to work and stuff, and then we come to these rallies and we go to these courts and in parliament inquiries and stuff like that. It's so drainful, and you just, you want to come down and just to go in with positive thoughts, but you're just going in, just going in with thoughts of mixed emotions, because you just don't know what's going to happen.
And you're quite right, it is a big effort to come all the way down from Bowraville or wherever else to get to the city. And,
we're all leaving our everyday lives, to go down and still fight for our families, fight for that justice.
So with the protests, and this is, I think it's good, but it's sad also in that the only way you get reaction or activity happening is where you protest or kick up a stink, and it shouldn't be that way. The police should be driving it, the judicial system should be driving it, trying to help you guys, but it's always you've got to push to get anything happen. But in those protests, you got some help from Pilch to start with, or before, the Public Interest Law Clearinghouse. Yep. Also, Allen's, the law firm, they and that was amazing, getting a law firm like Allen's to help with the submissions that we were putting in for the application to get the matters retried. And then, of course, UTS with Larissa Brent and Craig Longman, and they've been working tirelessly on it too. So you've started to get the support. You've got David Shoebridge. You've got the Parliamentary inquiry. From my point of view, I thought things were changing then. I thought people were actually listening to you there. People got up to have their say. I thought the politicians handled it properly. They came up to Bowraville, had a look for themselves. And I think we, won people over. I remember seeing in Parliament, and you were sitting in Parliament, and everyone was in Parliament, and the way that the politicians treated you. But then it seemed to drop off again. What's your thoughts there?
They seem to butter us up and then lube us up, and then want to give impact later that they're going to jam us with, they're not going to support us, it's the highs and lows of it all. You heard them, one fella said, you better sleep with his one eye open,
and he's someone that hadn't even supported us anyway.
Yeah, and there's, people crying, politicians crying and whatnot like that, and you're thinking, okay, this is feeling good. Yeah, possibly, yeah. Well, and then we just get let down again, because I think after then we couldn't get in. We applied to the DPP or
the Attorney General.
Attorney General's for it to go to court, and then they say no, and then. But didn't you overturn the double jeopardy law for us?
Look, it got confusing, and we won't bore people with the intricacies of the legal details on there. But the legislation was overturned. The legislation was overturned, so they brought in the legislation for double jeopardy, and it was if fresh and compelling evidence a person could be retried. Then that became a point of contention on what's fresh and what's compelling. Certainly the fresh side of it made it very difficult, and then it got bogged down with a legal argument about what does adduced mean, admitted or tendered, available or admitted. So all these things, it must be frustrating when you're talking about the murder of your 3 children.
Justice seems to boil down to a 5-letter word for our kids, for 3 innocent kids. It's boiling down to a 5-letter word that determines whether they get justice. And people don't seem to understand, is that they need to give clarity on what this word means.
Yeah.
Give clear clarity on what it means. Does it mean this at this time or this at that time? Give clarity on that, and then let us go to court, because this person still has to face 12 peers, and still get judged before his peers. He's still got to face court in that. If he does, if this if there's a clear definition of this word.
I do understand the reluctance of people for the legislation to be changed, and there's a lot of merit in the argument. But the protections were put in place with the way the legislation was. It's not going to be used as they said. It's almost like the sky is going to fall if they change the legislation. The judicial system's going to break down, and there's been no applications other than our application. So
that's exactly right. It's put the safeguards in place, so there's no floodgates anyway.
Yeah,
that's just a bullshit excuse. But put those safeguards in place so there can't be, and and just let us take it to court.
So with getting back with the politicians, and as I said, I like the way that you guys were treated with respect, the way they went about the parliamentary inquiry, and I saw the politicians when you were giving evidence up there at Maxville, and they were all crying. There were 7 politicians there, and they were crying. Now it looked genuine. That they seemed to care. I thought the important thing with the parliamentary inquiry that at last you got a voice. Did that? You felt like people were actually listening to you at that stage?
It did.
Yeah.
Even though at the time it did.
Yeah.
At the time it did, and we got a lot of support. We got counselling. The Bowraville community got a lot of things happening there and that. But at the end of the day, you can take that all back. I want justice for my niece.
Yeah.
I want Colleen found. I want Colleen brought home. Give us all this money for the community or whatever. At the end of the day, it doesn't make any difference to us.
It's not.
All we want is justice, and it's just frustrating. We want our whole story to be heard, not just little bits and pieces. They've only heard 2 parts of the story.
Yeah.
They've only heard Clinton's and they've only heard Hevelin's. They haven't heard Colleen's.
The strength of the case is all 3 matters being heard together, and that's your frustration, that there's never been all 3 matters heard together at the court.
Honestly, from the beginning it should have been trialled as a serial killings.
Yes.
Because in that way you can see how everything meets up, and how they were all in the same street, in a very small town. Like Annalou was saying earlier, it would be very unlikely for 3 different men to come into this very small town and take 3 kids from the same street. How people could think that is what happened is...
Well, and without naming names, but certain legal people very early in the campaign to get them heard together was saying there's no evidence to support the fact that these 3 matters are linked, and that's just missing the point. Like, what are they looking at? It's,
have they gone to Bowraville and driven those streets to where everybody is? A blind man can see.
Yeah. I think if you do come up, and that's where I think people have swung to understand what's gone on when they've taken the effort to come up, speak to you guys, have a look at the community, and get a sense of what we're talking about. These are where the kids have disappeared from. It seems ridiculous. So, parliamentary inquiry. Then where's the next step? There's just so many different things. On the back of the parliamentary inquiry, there was a training film that came out for the police, and that was acknowledgement of the fact it could have been done better. I think that part of it, and hopefully that's still...
It is.
Still being used?
It's still being used. I know someone that's just gone through the academy, and I think in her first week, the whole thing about... I suppose racism or Aboriginal communities, it was about Bowra, and then they showed the film. But saying that, there's more to New South Wales than Bowraville. Like, I'm not saying, you know what I mean? Every community is different, and I don't know. So I think maybe there needs to be a bit more. But they're working on that, I suppose. Yeah. But
well, it's good to hear that there's
she's only just been through the academy, so that's.
But that's tribute to you guys too. But you're a marginalised group of people living on the outskirts of a town, and you've managed to impact, not only get the commissioner, the police, say sorry, but also acknowledge that we've stuffed it up to the point where a training film based on your experiences. So that's.
But also in saying that, I guess people, or even people listening to this, don't understand of you know, how long these efforts were to get to one spot and then how long it took to get to the next place. You know, it was years and years of fighting that, you know, both three of their families were just continually waiting and unknowing. And that time between getting somewhere and getting the answer was a long time in between also. And that was just living in limbo, not knowing what's going to happen.
That's a very good point.
And just preparing yourself for you know, if you get knocked back, then what are we going to do next?
Yeah.
So it was just, you know, that's draining on everybody, you know, and you have loved ones that are getting old and, you know, passing away in between. I mean, this is 30 years that they've been missing, and it's just that continuous fight. What people don't understand, what we do behind what the media tell you.
Look, I'm stunned there because you've brought that across very clearly, that the amount of work that you guys have done over an extended period of time. This is not just one throw of the dice and let's try and get this done.
Yeah.
You have been pushing and pushing.
Yeah, you're getting laws changed. You're fighting and to get into Parliament. You know, you're actually sitting in there with all, you know, the politicians and people, getting your hopes up, and then, you know, once it just feels like they get you there, then you're just waiting around in limbo for so long, and then you're getting rejected. Then you've got another 2 or 3 year fight to get somewhere else.
The thing that saddens me with the battle that you guys have had, I haven't seen anything being done unless you initiate it. You initiate it through the media, you initiate it through protests or letters. No one ever seems to pick the ball up and run for you. It's always you guys have got to drive it, and the moment you turn your head away, it seems to stop. Would that be fair?
And you know what? I think that the media took a long time to get even the mainstream media, interested. And really only in the last few years have they. And, you know, credit where credit's due, they've played a fair part in us getting where we've got to.
Yeah.
But, it took a long time.
But it wasn't, and this is again whether it's conscious or unconscious racism or bias, like the media didn't see it was a story that was interesting in telling. And I would always get confused because I'd be doing murder investigations where the victim's a different type, or all of a sudden everyone's interested in that matter. And I'd be saying, but there's a serial killer that's on the loose and the police have, you know, botched up the original investigation. Isn't that a story? And people didn't see it as a story. And when you break it down, they're Aboriginal people. People don't identify with what they've gone through.
When we got that decision in 2013, I was in Brisbane, and Channel 9 contacted me, and they were going to do a story on the news.
Yep.
And then she contacted me back and said, "I'm sorry, can't do it. Wasn't a story."
Yeah.
People, they weren't going to get the interest. So the interest of the murder of 3 kids is not important.
Yeah.
It's not newsworthy.
You know, like back to what Lucas was saying, the amount of time we've had to wait for a decision to be handed down, I think you can add it up, and it goes up to nearly 5 years or maybe more.
I think closer to 10 years.
Yeah.
The times that we just had to sit and wait for politicians to make a decision.
What we're talking about there is when an application has gone in, that we wait and then wait.
And then they take them home over Christmas because they're so committed to it.
Oh, what was that one? I forgot about that one.
That was one Attorney General who was so committed to making sure he made the right decision that he even took the application home over Christmas. But yet he didn't know people's names, you know, when we met him.
But, you know, like Lucas said, we have to still live our normal lives. We have to bury people, we have to have babies, we have to get married, we have to care for each other, we have to send our kids to school, we have to work. And so, you know, we're not sitting around just on the mission drinking.
Yeah.
Like people think we are. We are active members in the community. We do work, we do have other kids and we're looking after them, and so we're doing all that too. But also, you know, Aboriginal people have a high mortality rate. So all of our witnesses are dying.
Yeah.
I think our oldest one is my mum, who's 76.
And I know you've been saying to me for the past 10 years or 15 years, you worry every winter that she might pass away.
Mum gets pneumonia every winter.
Yeah.
And I'm amazed that she's still going now. And, people don't understand that our witnesses are dying. It's going to get to a point where we're not going to be we can't get justice.
So how did you feel, because we got it to the Court of Criminal Appeal, and that was a big step, where the Attorney General, was that Gabriel Upton? Referred it and went to the Court of Criminal Appeal, and then we lost it there. And then the appeal, and it's almost, it got to the point, so the last dealings we've had with court, it was almost said, well, we've taken it as far as we can, and we had Wendy Abraham's legal team that did the last the submission, and credit where credit's due, they really embraced it and gave it a good hard go. But from that point in time, that you got summons in February. Want to tell me about that?
Oh, we got a message like the night before or the afternoon before to be up in Coffs Harbour. That's another 45 minutes away. Like, we ain't got jobs.
So who did you get a message from?
We actually got a message from Aboriginal Affairs, because the politicians down in Sydney always communicates to the Greater Northern Region Aboriginal Affairs Office in Coffs Harbour and get them to call us. So we get a text message or email or phone call from them to say, they want you to come up here, or
what for?
The Attorney General's coming wants to talk to you, and the Police Commissioner's going to be there too.
Right.
Okay, and so this is like 5:30 in the afternoon or something like that.
Yeah. And
it's Wednesday or Tuesday, something like that. You go up there, then early that morning you get the message, another phone message. Oh, the Police Commissioner's not going to be there. It's going to be the Acting Commissioner or something like that.
He was on the phone, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was on the phone. But the way they put it, he was going to be present. He was actually going to be there. But he was actually going to be, but he turned out to be on the phone. Yeah, so we rock up there, we're sitting in a small room, all waiting. We're standing down the front and we're talking, what do you think's going to happen? I remember talking to Mooney, and she said, they're not going to prove it.
And did they say why they were convening this meeting too?
No, they didn't. They just asked us to be up at Coffs Harbour.
Yep.
And me and Mooney were talking before we went up there, and she said, I don't think they're going to pass it. And I said, nah, don't get your hopes up too high. We just took it. We went up there, and then Mark Speakman, to his credit, he did show up. He's the only Attorney General I give kudos for, because he's said what he's going to do, and he's done it straight away. And he showed up, and he told us the bad news, the devastating news, that they wasn't going to support the double jeopardy law, the changing of the word or whatever.
A further application.
Further application, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we all lost it.
Yeah.
Well,
Ellen lost it. I agree with you. I'll give that to Mark Speakman. He turned up to face us, and he was probably really the scapegoat in a lot of ways, because the Commissioner was supposed to be there and he wasn't there. Whether he came to Coffs and chickened out at the last minute, who knows? But, where's your support for the families? Where's the support that the families were promised, when Scipione came up? And I believe Scipione meant those words.
He when he did speak those words, he said you will be supported for by the police every step of the way.
And it felt like, even though me and Mooney spoke beforehand, before we went upstairs and they told us the news, you still had that glimmer of hope, and that glimmer of hope is a lot. In reality, big hope you're hoping for, and then you just get stabbed.
But what else happened at the meeting?
Then Mark Speakman turned around and says, "Oh, I don't want to steal your thunder."
Yeah, well, you tell them. Oh, no, you tell them. Oh, no. Yeah. Oh, let's just have a little political moment and tell the families that we're going to, offer $1 million reward.
$1 million reward. We're devastated about not getting the double jeopardy. So we're swearing and cursing and crying and, just losing our plot again. And we just can't fathom why, and we're just trying to get some explanation why. And then they seem to want to butter us up again. And this is going to be really good news. We're going to offer it, and you won a consolation prize of $1 million. It was like that. It was like, come on down. Yeah. The price is right. You've won $1 million. So, and you're like, really? And then I think it was a ploy. They did it well, because then we didn't have time, because we were so upset about the double jeopardy and the outcome of that and our application. We lost sight of the $1 million, and we should have asked more questions about that. Because in reality, the $1 million is only for Colleen.
I listened in on the meeting, and I didn't think that the $1 million reward was going to make a huge difference. And you were told about what's happening with the investigation from there?
They told us that it was handed over to the cold case.
Colleen's case had been
all of ours have all of them have been handed over to the cold case, and that someone would be contacting us within a month or two, shortly about and to speak to us, to let us know what was going on. And to this day, still no one has contacted us.
From February
This year, no one has contacted us.
Not a peep. They
can't just ring up and say, this is what's happening. They didn't even have the courtesy to even ring up and say, you're leaving the police force, this is what's going to happen. It only was after some other incident in Bowraville and the media got a hold of it and thought it was connected to the Bowraville, our kids, that they even bothered to write a letter to us, the police, to acknowledge that.
But that was only because we initiated that.
Yeah. It's all because, as we keep saying, it's all about initiation. And we initiate something, and then they respond, and then we jump up and down, and then they respond.
And I mean, we asked at that meeting about Jerry and Bianca's involvement in the investigation, because they're not even, as far as we know, they weren't allowed to be part of the investigation anymore, and they're the ones that know.
Explain, Jerry and Bianca, that's Detective Sergeant Jerry Bowden and Bianca Commoner, the analysts. Yeah. They've been working on the investigation with me for 10 years, and they're the only people attached to the New South Wales Police that have any knowledge of that. And the recommendations from the Parliamentary inquiry was how it works, because the community trusts the investigators. So what's happened to Jerry and Bianca?
They're not there. I understand that they've been moved and they're not allowed to investigate. They're not a part of it anymore. So who have we got? We've got to build up a trust with who? No one at the moment, because no one's rung us. Yeah. And that man on the phone said that someone would be contacting us within a month about our case, about Evelyn, Colleen and Clinton, and where it was at. And we asked if you would be contacted, or if they would be speaking to Jerry or Bianca, and they said no.
But they did say that, because one of the questions we asked them was about having Jerry and Bianca involved again, and I'm sure that he said that they would be permitted to, but as far as I'm aware that they're not. And wouldn't it make sense for besides yourself, the people with the most knowledge. Isn't that the way you solve investigations? People that have the most knowledge about an investigation to be working.
Yeah, it can be argued that you put a fresh set of eyes, but we're totally missing what this investigation is about. If I haven't been spoken to, and I don't know whether Jerry and Bianca have been spoken to, but I know they've been taken off the investigation. Why, I have no idea.
But you know what they've missed the whole thing about communicating and building a rapport with the Aboriginal community and how we were treated at the beginning. They've totally forgotten all about that. You know, from the initial investigation, how we were treated, how this whole investigation was treated, how these 3 kids have been treated. They're still doing it to this day, 30 years later.
Does it feel like you've gone back in time?
Yeah.
Because of it.
We've got to continue the fight. We're continuing the fight on because they still don't get it. They just don't get it.
It's just like they're not culturally aware of how we work, and it's just like they expect us to move the way that they do things, and the way they do things, they didn't do it right from the beginning. So, you know, they could be culturally minded from the beginning from now at least, and say, you know, maybe we should be working around the families and how they like to work things. You know, they never once asked us, you know, how we would like to see things. You know, it's just like we had to just go by what they say, and that was it.
Well,
and then now we're still waiting. You know,
I know you guys would feel comfortable with Jerry and Bianca.
Yeah.
Like you've known them for 10 years, and you see that they're committed. And I'm out of the police, but they're still there. Yeah, I don't understand that.
But you know what? We've had a bad experience with the police at the beginning, initial investigation of this all, and we don't trust any of the coppers and that's coming up and talking to us and that. We get you and Jason in and Jerry and Bianca. You build up a rapport. You come into our community. You sit with us. Yeah, you know, you get to know our culture. You get to know us as people, and now, what by them ignoring us and hoping we'll just go away and not just communicate, we just want someone to pick up a damn phone or send an email or something. But have common courtesy and respect for these kids and these parents to say to them, this is what's happening. What is so hard about that?
Well, that was a big lesson that was supposedly learnt from the Parliamentary inquiry, the need to keep the families. They haven't learned a damn thing.
Not the politicians, not the police.
So if you had something to say to the police, what would you be saying at this stage, where we're at now?
Pick up the phone, give my sister a call, Rebecca Statham, Billy Greener, Muriel Craig, Michael Walker, Thomas Duro, June Speedy. You need to call the parents, tell them what's happening with their children's case.
Yeah.
Yeah. Common
courtesy.
You
know, it's been 30 years since they've been missing, and it's just like we're still trying to get answers, but then it's like we're still telling them how to do their job because they're not communicating with us. They're just doing one thing and leaving us in the dark. You know, they need to step up and actually do their job, because you know, all that my mum knows, or any of the families know, is that they're being changed over to cold case, and they said to them, oh well, there'll be, you know, fresh eyes looking at the cases, but never once they told us who that person was, or you know, when would they contact us. You know, we're still here waiting today.
Yeah.
And I think it's all good and well to have a fresh set of eyes, but what about a handover?
Yeah.
You know, like you weren't able to do a handover. You weren't able to come and see us.
I just find it ridiculous how they've cut me off on something like Bowraville with all that knowledge. That's 25 years of knowledge. So I let them try and justify that. I just don't understand it.
But you know, it's about showing respect for the
families,
for these families, for these parents, and for these 3 young kids.
Yeah.
You know, there's just no respect in what's happened to them, and it's just tragic.
Yeah.
You know, it seems like everyone else has forgotten them. The people who's supposed to help protect them and look after them and govern our society, you know, and make the laws for our society, they've just forgotten about these 3 young children.
Yeah.
And that's really sad and disgusting. They should hang their heads in shame.
You still haven't got answers, and I know, I can't remember who raised it, but one of you guys raised it about the possibility of it going to inquest to find out answers. Like, the courts haven't given the answers, but if it went to inquest, everyone comes and gives their evidence, and then a determination on what's happened. And it's not the first time just because there's been an inquest. There's no barrier to not have a further inquest, and where people come and give evidence. All 3 matters.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that?
I think something needs to be done. An inquest, yes, because it needs to be all laid out on the table. We can't see. No one's given us answers. No one's been shown the answers or anything. It needs to be laid out so that everyone can see what's happened, where it's gone wrong, and try and give us some answers. We've got to get some answers somewhere. And if our only avenue is an inquest, yes, an inquest, by all means.
And if it can be, it could have some answers for where Colleen is, if it's something along the lines of what happened with Matthew Levison's.
Yeah, well, that's true, and that was in a similar situation, that a person had been acquitted and the body hadn't been recovered, and they got their body back, and you guys remind me of them, or they remind me of you, because they fight too, and just did not take no for an answer. So it's the sad part about this too is how, and I've seen it during the protests, I've seen it at the courts, and see it, it's been passed on to the next generation.
Yeah.
And
it is. I see my nephews and nieces fighting, and I hear my sisters saying, I never wanted my kids to fight our fight.
Yeah.
It's just that intergenerational going through the next generation, and then my sisters are being grandparents, and you feel hurt knowing that they're going to grow up knowing their auntie for being that one who's missing and never found, and having that hurt when, none of these kids should have to carry our fight when they're, this shouldn't have been going on for 30 years. It's just disgusting to see how we were treated, and now our kids now are looking at it and are fighting with us when we go to these courts and stuff. It's really sad.
We have to educate them and tell them the story. We have to go back right from the beginning of when the kids went missing and tell them the story. We have to walk them through the court processes and all this and that, and tell them who they need to go. You're teaching them how to fight for justice, and it shouldn't be the case. Like I keep saying, it shouldn't be the case. And it just floors you as to why this is happening. Because, you want to teach good kids memories about their auntie, their sister and that, and just have good memories. But you can't, because they can see the stress on us. They can see their parents hurting and still traumatised by it and angry. And so they're going to grow up angry, traumatised and hurt and hating police, or, not trusting police and not trusting politicians. And people wonder why they're going to be protesting in that. It's because we haven't got answers. We haven't got justice.
Well, I think, it's very topical with the Black Lives Matters march. And I thought the big ones in Sydney, or the big ones across the country, and people going, Black Lives Matters. And I'm thinking, I've marched with you guys 4 times before that, with the chant of Black Lives Matter carried on, because it's not just about what they're protesting in America, or where it's police killing black people. It's also about situations like you guys are confronted with, where 3 kids have been murdered, and because they're black, it doesn't mean that their lives don't matter.
That's right.
So, we'll finish up. Thank you so much for coming in. I just want to say that the way you guys have fought, I've never seen anything like it. People, people come up to me and talk about it, and they put you up there on a pedestal because how hard you fight. People are starting to listen and are starting to understand the injustice that you guys have had to battle against. But what amazes me about all the families, you still, despite how many kicks in the guts you've had, you still all put your faith in the system, and you, every time that you get knocked back, you get up again and you push and push. So yeah, it's testament to how much the children were loved. So they're not going to be forgotten, and I admire your tenacity and effort, guys. So
thank you.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, Gary. Because you probably,
without your support, we wouldn't, and your knowledge and your push for us. You just walk with us through this. You haven't made any promises to us, but saying that you only support us and be with us along the way, and you have been.
Yeah.
And we really thank you for that.
I'm happy to report that since the recording of this podcast, the families have at last heard from the New South Wales Police. Detectives from the Homicide Squad, in fact, took the time to go and meet with the families. I know these detectives. They seem genuine in their efforts to get justice for the families. They have also taken the initiative to speak to myself, Jerry Bowden and Bianca Commoner about our knowledge of the investigation. This shows me they're truly trying to assist the families, not to speak to the officers who have worked with the families for decades would fly in the face of reason. Let's hope they get some answers because the families deserve justice. Next week on I Catch Killers, we're going to have a conversation with a fascinating lady who has an interesting story to tell. We are talking to high-profile barrister Margaret Cunneen, Senior Counsel. Margaret is one of the country's most experienced prosecutors who has prosecuted some of the country's worst criminals. She is also subject of a corruption inquiry where she was publicly humiliated only to be later fully exonerated of any wrongdoing. She is now working as a defence barrister. I've known Margaret for over 30 years. She is the person I turned to when the police pursued me. I hope you can join us next week on I Catch Killers with our guest Margaret Cunneen.